Trustee Peters, I can hear.
Trustee Pollock.
Trustee Pollock as well.
And
Trustee Evans.
Trustee Evans is barely yes.
Do we
Talk
have,
louder.
do we have another one of these?
Maybe only. I won't
Wendell,
talk
could you hear all that?
Yep, I heard everything.
Christian, you're just going to have to
I will.
project. Give me just a minute, folks. Call the meeting to order, please. This is the Village of Riverside agenda for continued public hearing on the proposed creation of Harlem Avenue Business District Number 2 and the adoption of a business district plan for proposed Harlem Avenue Business District Number 2. Ms. Haley, please call the roll. Ms. Haley?
President Sells.
Here.
Trustee Hannan.
Here.
Trustee Peters.
Here.
Trustee Pollock.
Here.
Trustee Evans.
Here.
Trustee Gallegos.
Here.
Trustee Tisa.
Here.
Village Manager Francis. Here. Village Attorney Mars.
Here.
Community Development Director App.
Here.
Also present Village Clerk Haley.
Thank you very much. Director Apt, if you'll please do the publication of public hearing notice.
Yes, the publication of the public notice was posted in the paper on March 11th, 2020 and March 18th, 2020 in the Riverside Brookfield landmark per the state statute requirements, and we have a copy of the certificate of publication in your packets.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to have the presentation on the proposed creation of the Harlem Avenue Business District 2 and a proposed district plan for District 2. And this presentation will also include the next public hearing item, which is District Number 3. And we have with us tonight from Kane McKenna, Phil McKenna. Sir, Mr. McKenna, welcome this evening.
Hi.
And please, whenever you're ready.
It's a whole new world.
It is indeed a whole new world.
These are two proposed TIF districts along Harlem Avenue, and since the characteristics are the same with both, I would go through both of them in the same manner with a couple of exceptions. The village will recall that there's an existing business district along Harlem Avenue on the far left. There's a proposed new business district number 2, which is the subject of this public hearing, which basically goes along Harlem on the west side from Shenstone down to Lawton and over Burlington to Del Plain. Proposed business district at Ogden, at Harlem and Ogden, is shown on the third slide. What is a business district all about? It's a contiguous area in which it's determined that some rehabilitation, some public improvements need to take place in order to keep businesses viable. The area after designation usually is subject to a sales tax. Also could be hotel tax, but that's not applicable in this case. The sales tax cannot exceed 1% total, and it would be imposed in increments of 1/4%. There's a term blighted area with respect to the designation of such a district. What does a blighted area really mean? It means that there's factors that retard housing or constitute economic or social liability. That's really the one we're geared toward here. Economic underutilization of the area and a potential menace to health, welfare, and safety. So we've got, in these areas, we find inadequate street layout, basically because it's old. It does not accommodate modern-day commercial activities. We did not find any unsafe or unsanitary conditions. We did, with respect to Business District Proposed 3, find some site improvements that were deteriorated. But we did in both areas find that there's an improper subdivision, obsolete platted. So basically, the area was platted not for the modern-day traffic considerations that are there now. We did not find any conditions which endanger life or property. It's important to note that the factors are for the area as a whole. They're not adjudications in any manner on any particular businesses within the area. It's not only the structures that are there, but also the getting in and out of the structures, the fact that it's difficult to have parking there, it's difficult to have truck loading and unloading at docks there. Those are the kinds of factors that go into this determination. What happens if you have a business district where you have an additional sales tax of up to 1%? It doesn't apply to any title items. It doesn't apply to groceries in the same way that existing taxes don't apply to certain groceries items that are for unprepared foods. It doesn't apply to prescriptions or medical equipment. If adopted, it would start being collected by the state through the state's normal mechanism on January 1st. The two examples there are just for a retail calculation and a restaurant calculation. We're talking about what is the difference in terms of the sales tax paid by the consumer. With the additional sales tax of business district, an item of $10 would go up by 10 cents. The same with respect to the example of the restaurant, which since you have a places of eating tax on that, it'd go from $10 to $11.20. If you extrapolate from that, you can see it's not a huge additional tax on any particular resident or any particular purchase.
Mr. McKenna, can I pause you just for a second? I made an error. I need to swear you in, and it just dawned on me that I need to swear you in for the public hearing. So if you could raise your right hand, please, and anyone else who's intending to give testimony could raise their right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're giving this evening is true to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Yes, I do.
I'm sorry to interrupt, sir.
That's okay. That's fine. So why does a municipality even consider a business district? Well, it allows certain underutilized businesses or commercial areas to become more viable. One of the things that you use a business district for is rehabilitation funds. Small business comes in, says, we'd like to do some expansion, we'd like to do some rehab of our building because it's old, then there's the opportunity to use the business district funds to help that retailer out. You can direct for land uses, all subject to existing planning and zoning. There's nothing that says in this there's any special treatment with respect to the planning and zoning procedures that a village normally follows. You can do public improvements and private improvements with the hotel tax, with the sales tax in this case. And among the improvements you might consider, at our suggestion, would be parking in the area. Could you do things to increase the parking opportunities? You can remain competitive in an increasing marketplace that's very difficult. And the creation of the business district does not negatively impact any other taxing district. This is not like a tax income and finance district, where property taxes paid get shifted from one particular jurisdiction to another. This is a tax that is imposed solely within the confines of the retailers within the particular business district area. It's collected by the state of Illinois in the normal collections, and then it's remitted to the village on a quarterly basis. The village then keeps track of that in a separate fund. It can't be mixed with the general fund, can't be used for any other purposes other than within the particular business district. There is an accounting and a full audit of the business district annually as well. Some communities that have considered business districts, most of these have been adopted, some of them are in process right now, but you'll notice some western suburban ones in Elmwood Park, LaGrange Park, Lombard, River Forest, and obviously you have one yourselves. So they've been both used in larger areas and smaller areas. I think the one in River Forge is one of the smallest ones that I know. It's right along the lake in Lathrop in connection with the new developments there. What are the costs that are eligible for funding? Studies, surveys, plans, property assembly, including acquisition. I think that would apply in the instance here of additional parking. If there were lots available that could ease the parking constraints, they could be acquired. Site preparation, including any clearance or removal of existing structures, any infrastructure improvements, maybe more importantly and most importantly in terms of discussions with staff, is renovation of existing improvements and fixtures. Now, either through grants or loans, a program set up to the village, funded by the business district tax, can be made available to the existing businesses. Construction of buildings is permissible. Financing cost and relocation cost are also permissible. The designation process. Well, there was already passed by the board an ordinance proposing the approval of the business district plan. I do want to state the business district plan that I went over that night before the board had an error in my presentation with respect to the budget. The budget is slightly over $15 million with respect to business district 2 and slightly over $5 million with respect to business district number 3. And that's contained in the plans themselves. So that business district plan has been put on file, it's been considered. As Sonia pointed out, notices have already appeared. Public hearings are tonight. If the board decides to go through with that, they would pass ordinances approving the business district plan and designating the business district sales tax. The ordinance would be passed with respect to that regard, and the next available date for collection from the Department of Revenue would be January 1st. Just a quick note on District Number 2, the length of the TIP district, the current uses, food, dining, retail, office, residential, mixed uses. This is not a proposal to change any of those uses whatsoever, but to complement and supplement those uses. We found this one had economic liability by virtue of improper subdivision, obsolete planning. You can see how small the plats are as they currently exist, and defective and inadequate non-existent street layout. I'm sure that you all know better than I do the difficulties of turning in and out, particularly if you're trying to turn on Harlem Avenue. This is the Ogden Harlem. Would you like me to go?
Yes,
okay.
please.
This is the northwest corner of Harlem and Ogden, going west on Ogden. Current uses are food and dining, retail, office. This is a particular area in all our visits out we found was very much in need of some more parking in order to spark activity there. So there is the same non-existent or inadequate street layout. There was some deterioration of some site improvements here, and I believe this is also where the B of A facility is vacant as well. These are not, findings that are saying that anything is wrong with the businesses there. It's that what can you do to get them up to 2020 standards in terms of producing more revenue for themselves as well as the village. So tonight we're at the public hearing. After the public hearing, there'd be consideration of the ordinances, and then the deadline in terms of filing. State has 2 deadlines a year. In order to make the January elections, it would need to be filed by October 1st. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. If you can just stand by, please. Director Abt, do you have testimony you would like to add?
Yes, I will just add to that. Mr. McKenna kind of went over the plan and the designation, but I do want to say that this public hearing is also in regards to adopting that business district tax. So in addition to designating the districts, you're considering the additional sales tax that's allowed by the state statute. As he mentioned, it can be adopted in 0.25% increments, not to exceed 1%. We did adopt the full 1% sales tax for Harlem Avenue Business District Number 1 that's located up at Harlem and Long Common. Staff does recommend adopting the full 1% tax for the new districts to be consistent and fair with our other areas. Also, the sales tax is not applied to certain items such as groceries or other unprepared foods, titled or registered personal property such as an automobile, or prescriptions and medical equipment, just to kind of clarify a little bit about what that sales tax could be applied to. So I also wanted to note that Mr. McKenna and I did hold an informational open house meeting. We did have to do it via Zoom on May 26th to provide some information about our business districts and the village's goals and objectives and answer any questions they might have. We did have 2 participants who asked a few questions related to the village's interest in purchasing or acquiring property, and also about the application of the tax. So we do have 90 days from conducting the public hearing to adopt the ordinances establishing the business district and the additional tax. If the board pleases, we can put that on the next meeting in June for adoption, if that's the way you want to proceed.
Thank you, Director Apt. Trustees, any questions for either Mr. McKenna or Director Apt on Business District 2? Mr. Hannon?
And I'm sure at some point I knew this. This District Number 2 looks like it comes down Burlington Street and appears to cover only the south side of Burlington, and just wanted to understand the rationale for not including the north side.
A large portion of the north side is residential as apartment buildings or townhomes, and so I don't believe we included those particular areas. So we kind of tried to follow where the commercial buildings were on Burlington.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Other questions from the trustees? Mr. Gisa, Mr. Gallegos, any questions?
No questions.
Mr. Gallegos? Mr. Gallegos?
I apologize, I had you on mute. No questions here.
Thank you very much. Did we have any communications from the public on this item?
I have not received any comments from the public.
Okay. Hearing no further comments, I would ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the public
Did
hearing.
we want to double check if anybody out in the,
Would you like to step out and see if there's anybody that has a comment? We just got notice from Mr. Buckley that there is no one outside here on this issue.
Nope, nobody out there.
Okay. Thank you, Director Apt, for that. So hearing no further questions or comments, Mr. McKenna, if you can just hang in there. I would ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the public hearing on Business District Number 2.
So moved.
By Ms. Peters,
Second.
by Mr. Hannon. Please call the roll.
Trustee Hannon.
Aye.
Trustee Peters.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Giza.
Aye.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned. And I'll call to order the agenda for the continued public hearing on the proposed creation of Ogden Harlem District Number 3 and the adoption of a business district plan for the proposed Ogden Harlem Business District Number 3. Please call the roll.
President Sells.
Here.
Trustee Hannon.
Here.
Trustee Peters.
Here.
Trustee Pollock.
Here.
Trustee Evans.
Here.
Trustee Gallegos.
Here.
Trustee Giza.
Here.
Village Attorney Mars.
Here.
Village Manager Francis. Here. Community Development Director Apt.
Here.
Also present Village Clerk Haley.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move on now to the presentation on the proposed creation of the Ogden Harlem Business District Number 3 and a proposed business district plan for the proposed Ogden Harlem Business District Number 3. If you anticipate giving testimony, can you please rise and raise your right hand, please? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give this evening is true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Mr. McKenna, did you have anything you wanted to add on this item that you didn't say previously?
No, the purposes and objectives of the Business District 3 are the same as Business District 2.
Thank you very much. Director Apt, additional comments?
No, all I have is that the certificate of publication was published as well for this one on the same dates, March 11th and March 18th in the RB Landmark.
Great, thank you very much. Questions or comments for the Business District Number 3 by anyone?
And just, President Sells, for
Yes.
the record, if we could just note that we had on the record for this one, that we had the presentation for this business district a few moments ago during the hearing for business district number 2.
We had the presentation on this business district just a few minutes ago under the presentation for business district number 2. Thank you, Attorney Marsh. Is there anyone outside that you know of that has a comment or question on this issue? I see none. All right, hearing no comments or questions, I would ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the hearing on business district number 3.
I'll make a motion.
By Ms. Evans,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Peters. Please call the roll.
President Sells, could you please clarify who made the motion?
The motion was by Trustee Evans, second by Trustee Peters.
Thank you. For the vote, Trustee Hannan,
Aye.
Trustee Peters,
Aye.
Trustee Pollock,
Aye.
Trustee Evans,
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos,
Aye.
Trustee Giza,
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Mr. McKenna, thank you very much for your firm's excellent work as always. We appreciate it. With that, we'll move on now, and I'll call to order the Village of Riverside Board of Trustees regular meeting for Thursday, June 4th, 2020. The time is 7:22, and this is immediately following the public hearings for the Harlem Business District Number 2 and Ogden Harlem Business District Number 3. Please call the roll.
President Sells,
Here?
Trustee Hannan,
Here.
Trustee Peters,
Here.
Trustee Pollock,
Here.
Trustee Evans,
Here.
Trustee Gallegos,
Here.
Trustee Giza,
Here.
Village Manager Francis. Here. Village Attorney Mars.
Here.
Thank you
Community
very,
Development Director Apt.
Here.
Also present Village Clerk Haley.
thank you very much. If you're here with us, if you'll please join us with the pledge. Thank you very much. I know that we have several people outside who are interested in speaking on an agenda item that's later on in the meeting. So if I think they're all watching the monitor out there, you're welcome to make your comments now if you wish, or if you'd like to wait until we actually get to the agenda item, you can then make your comments at that time. So if anyone would like to make a public comment at this time, please let that be known to Mr. Buckley, who is out there with you.
Sorry to interject for President Sells. Could I get that light killed? The projector light? Thank you.
Good evening,
evening, sir.
everyone. I'm John Plunkett. My family's lived at 107 Pine Avenue for the past 28 years this very month. I appreciate the opportunity to come here tonight and share my views. And this is my very first public outing. I've avoided them like the plague due to COVID-19. I'm 78 years old and right in the wheelhouse that COVID-19 deals with, I guess. I broke down and came here this evening because of the importance of this particular driveway issue to my family. My wife and I are both retired. We're living on fixed incomes, and we do try to make improvements to the home whenever we can. We have a permit right now, as a matter of fact, that next week allows us to do a demolition on an old garage and replace it with a new one at quite an expense by the time it's done. And so we're not opposed to improving the property, that's for sure. While I haven't gotten a quote, I know that in order to reach our garage from the sidewalk, it's about 200 feet. So I know that a paved driveway would be very expensive. Pavers would probably be even more expensive. And we're just strongly opposed to putting in blacktop and pouring petroleum products on the driveway that have to be maintained every bit as much as gravel driveways. While in looking at this issue, it seems to me that while only 1/3 of 1% of all the residents of Riverside will endure the costs involved in replacing driveways. And that's true whether we do it right now or whether we do it at the time of sale and have to back down on the price in order to allow the new buyer to make that improvement right off the bat. So the costs are roughly the same, no matter which way we go with that. And the thing that complicates that whole issue even more with me, over and above the expenses, is that I don't see that there's really any positive impact in promoting public health, public safety, comfort, convenience, and the general welfare of the village. Nor do I see there's any relative gain to the public as compared to the hardship imposed on 35 families. So for these reasons, basically, I strongly encourage the board to finally put this matter to bed and vote to grandfather in the existing gravel driveways and provide clear maintenance standards, and then hold us to those maintenance standards. I think people would be more than happy to comply with that. So unless you have questions, I'm going to take off, get out of here, and get home to safety on 107 Pine Avenue.
We appreciate you coming in and sharing your thoughts with us, Mr. Plunkett.
We really, our family recognizes the time all of you put in for free on behalf of all of us. So thank you very much for
That's
that
very
time.
kind. Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Stay well.
Thank you.
Hello, Lad Kohanek, 99 Groveland, with my wife Claudia. I hope all is well with everyone. I took a walk from 99 Groveland to the township. It's a very nice walk, a perfect evening. As I walked, you start looking at where gravel is. And there's a new owner of a place 5 buildings south of us, which installed a new gravel driveway. Very nice, very bright, very new, very brilliant. I would assume that Riverside had a lot of gravel years ago when it was founded and these buildings were put in. As I proceeded, I passed the bridge, which is where Martan put their cofferdam and put gravel underneath the bridge with a wire netting, and that also was the time in 2013 when we flooded as a result of the blockage of the complete river flow. As I did drive or walk here, there was another older driveway, probably that's been there for a long time. I crossed the Burlington Railroad tracks. Their track is supported by gravel or what they call ballast. So then you can start looking around and seeing that there's a lot of gravel that's visible in Riverside. I recycle, I take my electronics to the recycling place. That street has no curbs. All the aprons are gravel. I believe even where Riverside utility trucks go in has a gravel driveway. So my point is that there's a lot of gravel in Riverside that over time probably most of it's going to wind up disappearing. My concern, and there's also Swan Pond that has the gravel pathway. There's Indian Gardens that has a gravel parking area. So if I'm guilty with my gravel parking area, so is Riverside. But the concern that I think you all have is porosity. That gravel does not allow water to pass through. And that just doesn't ring true to me. So what I did, and videos were sent to Sonia Apt, the Community Developmental Director, and I took water, I filmed it, and I spilled the water on my parking area, and instead of it pooling into a puddle or draining off, it went through the gravel. So then I went to the new owners, introduced myself, spoke to a very nice young lady, very sharp, very articulate, and I said, do you mind if I spill water on your brand new driveway, which has bigger rocks? And she said, fine, I'm aware, I'm in non-compliance also. Filming it, water seeped through, so there is porosity through the gravel. Then I know that Riverside had put in nice paving stones with certain drainage capabilities in their parking area in downtown Riverside, and I filmed that, and yes, that drains nicely too. When you look at my building from the street, I have a cement driveway. In the back of the building, we have a common alley that services both Lincoln and Groveland. On the Lincoln side are large apartment buildings that accommodate maybe 30 units. And so when my parents were alive, people were approaching them. The manager of these buildings were saying, we need parking spaces. You have 2 empty lots, unbuilt, which is north of our building. Can you put some gravel down so there's more parking areas? I, at the time, wasn't living in that building, and they did it before I came home. It was all done and said. I would have preferred not to, but people are just begging us. And today, it still looks and is even like it was when it was put in. When I look at some of the neighbors' asphalt driveways and aprons, there's cracks, there's holes. I kind of avoid going on that side because at my age, I don't need to fall anymore. So my point, and then that's all I need to say, is that the studies that you keep on citing, that gravel has no porosity to it, that it's maybe as impermeable close to cement, just isn't the case. The parking is a necessity. Years ago, the big apartment complexes that had one line of cars for parking and then a grass space next to the building, they took out that grass space, I guess I would think with the village permission, because I'm sure a permit needed to be pulled, and now the entire back of the building is all asphalt. So what is done. There still isn't enough parking. I'm sure that all the parking spaces on Park Place, where the village rents parking spaces, are all full. I never see empties. People are begging to get a spot there, and that's limited. What we charge for a parking space is what we charged 30 years ago, not the increases that the village is probably charging right now. So, and that's probably why we never find out if there's a new tenant coming in, because it's just passed to the new tenant in one of these apartment complexes. So that's my point. You can do what you want. There's reasons why you might want to change things, but don't tell me that gravel does not absorb and allow water to pass through to the earth. Thank you.
I'm going to be quick.
Please.
Okay. Since Groveland, Lincoln, and Kimbark, we are the flooding streets. Since the gravel on wherever it is on those streets helps with the porosity of the rain and not for us to flood. I think that we all should be grandfathered in so that we do not have to change it, because we have flooded, and when we flood in our lower level because the lots have not been built on, I get 4.5 feet of water in my home. So if you have a kind heart, leave the gravel alone on those streets. At least something could go through instead of, our street looked like a pond. So this is why I am asking for that. Grandfather us in. It's been that way for 60 years. Do the new people who are coming in, but leave us alone. We've gone through enough heartache.
And with that one point, and then I'm done. The river has never gotten this high 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago since we've been flooded, because normally we get inundated by the adjacent blocks. This time we didn't get inundated, so the height of the river even went higher.
But we opened the locks that helped us.
When the fire department comes to notify that there's the possibility that we may have to evacuate, Claudia went down to where they were standing at the end of the road to check the bridge. That's how we measure how high the water is getting. And she asked the firemen, "Have you opened up the locks yet?"
When the locks had helped us with no
he
dam.
said, the fireman said no. And she said that I flooded up to this high 3 times while living in
With
this
no
area.
locks open.
And if you open up the locks, the river may not crest as high. Within an hour, thank God for these firemen, apparently they did call, because the water, which was just flowing down the river, took off like a racehorse. You could tell that there was an immediate difference, and we attributed that to the opening of the locks. I'm a resident there. I don't really need to be quick on the draw that way, but I'm trying to save my house. Riverside should also have somebody on duty to say, You know, last time they opened up the locks, they didn't flood. That's something we have to always make sure in every crisis. Thank you very much. I hope you all
Thank
stay
you.
well.
Thank you very much, you too. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Georgia Albertson. I had sent my notes in. I don't know if you people have read them or not, but I'd like to say a few things if you don't mind. The true charm of our village is that every street contains houses of different styles, colors, and material. It's one of those things that make us so special. We work very hard to preserve our uniqueness. I think that the gravel driveways contribute to that. Why not? Okay? Drive into District 1, and it's like going back into time. Many of those houses all started with gravel. There's one particular yellow house that still has a gravel driveway. And frankly, I believe that that's what kind of makes it extra special. Any change would erase that. History would be gone. Okay. I met a couple who live in a house that the husband's grandfather built here in Riverside. The plan is that someday their son and his family will live in that house. It's had a gravel driveway from the day of construction. That would be 4 generations that have lived with the gravel driveway. I think that's a kind of a remarkable family history and a legacy, and this would erase that, and I don't think that's fair. We bought our house 53 years ago with a gravel driveway. We have made changes through the years, but never thought about changing the driveway. It does the job, it is unique, and we like that. Gravel driveways it's hard to clear the snow, and there's work to be done on them, to maintain them. But it's always worked well for us. And I just don't want to have to see that replaced with, blacktop. It just strikes me as foolish. Most of the driveways are owned by seniors. This is an expense we cannot afford, and the idea of making it so that the next owner, after we sell or die, would have to then, put in the driveway within a year, that'll still cost us. Because if I go to sell my house and this is in there, you gotta put a driveway in, the money I'm gonna get for that house is gone. I've been retired for 13 years now. We're making it, we're fine, but this will just kill us. And many of the people that I talk to in some of these other meetings, it's the same thing. And some of the others are older than I am, and it's hard to deal with this. It really is. This is an expense. A lot of people, in the first meeting, they said, well, it's $15,000. Somebody said, okay, $15,000, then you have to hire an engineer and all that, and that depends on the length of your driveway. Maybe it's $15,000 from here to there. I got a drive that's like 100 feet. I can't even imagine what that would cost. So they're throwing out, well, this is what it's going to cost. They have no idea. It's foolish. And this thing with the water, what those people said is true. The gravel doesn't absorb the water. Yes, it does. So sometimes the facts that you're given, I don't think are actually true. Since this happened, one of the things I did is I traveled through town to check out other driveways. And the interesting thing that I found is not only the gravel driveways, but there's a lot of cement and blacktop driveways that really need some work. So if you're done with us, are you then going to go after blacktop and cement driveways? Would that be the next step? You really have to think about this. Simply put, this is putting a burden on senior citizens that we really can't handle. And it's putting a lot of stress on us at this time of our life. I really don't think it's fair. I honestly don't think it was thought through, because when they talked about the $15,000, it was like it was chump change. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not chump change. So I guess that's probably the end of it. My last, and one question I do have any other towns done this? Is there any precedent for this? Not that I'm aware of. Why are we, the first to be doing this? I'd really like to understand it. I've been in this village long enough. This is reminding me of turtle wars on Long Common with the park, literally. We don't want to go down that road. Let's not lose what makes us special. A mixture of styles, a loving appreciation of the past, and a love for our uniqueness. We are different. Let's celebrate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming this evening. We appreciate it.
Mike Tomasek, 56 Pine. Let's see. I want to just say a couple of things that I did not see and that were to be clear, maybe clarify what was in the agenda items. I'm talking about the existing gravel driveway, and I have one of those. I agree that if you want the standard to be for new development or for a significant capital improvement to go to non-gravel, if you want to go it that way, but the subject I'm interested in is what do you do with the existing ones, the 35, and that's kind of like, okay, so and that's otherwise known as, well, I think it was grandfathered. That's the approach that we were told. My wife reminded me, and she remembers, she has a very good memory, and she said in 05, 08, when this was brought up by the village, don't worry, your grandfather. Okay. And we discovered in the December meeting with the Planning and Zone Commission, when more people came in pre-COVID, they all had people also had a similar, this is what they heard. And I just want to clarify that was the gist of what we were told. But whether it was in 7.B, paragraph C, I'm not sure. But indications that we were grandfathered were that we did not try to do the work to pave. We didn't actively oppose the village because they said we didn't need it was okay, and the village didn't come after us. So those are indications of that we were grandfathered, and also what this grandfather approach is really what our peer municipalities. We found out by the good work by the staff over here in page 100 of the attachments here. We found that they all grandfather. They have no compliance requirement to adhere to the. All of them do not want gravel as their standard. However, they all treated existing driveways as the grandfather. And so why did our village talk that way in 05, 08, and which is similar to Brookfield, River Forest, Hinsdale, LaGrange Park, Western Springs, is because it's a reasonable thing to do they knew that it was a significant outlay for the property owners kind of coming out of the blue, and it would be not equitable. You're not asking everyone in the village for that kind of an assessment, and it's not for any kind of a health issue or safety issue. I guess it's aesthetics. On that subject, I actually did the field trip. I looked at all 35 for a bike ride, and just tell them about this. Like, hey, don't forget about this, And one thing that struck me in my field trip is that, from an aesthetic point of view, none of them, the gravel driveways did not stick out like a sore thumb. It wasn't an aesthetic blot. So if that's the driver, it's false. The other thing I saw that, except for a couple, they were in good repair, and it was far more proportionally for like blacktop and concrete were in really poor repair, like moonscapes sometimes. And it's a little side comment. So, and I also want to say that it is it's significantly costly to do this. It's not like replacing peeling paint by getting like 4 gallons of paint or something, which is a kind of a classic village standard ordinance that we all, and it's not that big, it's not a problem for anyone. But in this case, it's many thousands of dollars that I'm on a fixed income, a lot of other people are. It would, sometimes you might even have to sell, so it's almost a de facto eviction. But and then I talked about the lack of equitability and our peer municipalities, got that, and I saw one statement in the materials. Chairperson Mateo from the Planning and Zone said she thought that it's no better or worse functionally as concrete or asphalt, so she did not see a compelling reason to require them to be replaced. She was in favor of allowing existing gravel driveways to be grandfathered, provided they were maintained. So I would agree with that point of view. And I could maybe talk another 10 pages, but and then I was gonna say rain, and then just walk away, or I could have said COVID-19 and walk away. Bloomberg came out with a report today, like millions of jobs are gone and can't, have trouble clawing its way back. Something like this, which is again it's not really good for the public good even. It's certainly marginal at best. It's kind of going in the wrong direction, and in this severe economic. However, you don't need the severe economic straits to justify a grandfathering. It's the other reasons I said. And rain is important. I mean, it's like, we got a reminder here, for an argument. What we just saw recently, which of course is not the first time we've seen this, this amount of precipitation and the havoc it wreaked on our town. And so it's in everyone's mind, rain management and retention, and that's a big thing. So it seems a little odd, almost nonsensical, that that the village is considering, for these poor 30 people to make it into a fossil fuel-based, non-porous substrate. It's going in the wrong direction. And I would agree with that other person about that. I know that I think in the state, in the materials here, I think the Metropolitan Reclamation District doesn't define gravel driveway as a porous substrate, but maybe they have special criteria for that, but I know in seeing rain in my driveway, it doesn't go down at the same rate as concrete driveways do. And I remember I did talk to a couple contractors to see the damages that are potential here, but it's significant. And there's other complications too, but I'll get to that. More than a couple of them said the same joke. We want to give back to the village. We want to make sure the village gets all the water. That was their joke. It's the concrete contractor's joke. Make sure we give the village. And Mr. Salas and everybody here know about all the load on the main, and I saw his comments in the exchanges and stuff, and the e-flashes, and like trying to watch out for putting the extra load onto our main, and so it's not quite a joking matter. So anyway, this subject touches on something that is only happening with greater frequency, as we know, and I would. While it might not be the same as other kinds of substrates, it absorbs a little bit. I just want to make that clear. And it kind of makes sense. Maybe the Metropolitan Reclamation District has a special criteria. I think that was the biggest points. Okay. I appreciate you guys doing the work of the village business in these times. And I think I got most of the stuff I want. And so, yeah, grandfather is what we were told, whether it got into the code, I'm not sure, but or if it did, it was unclear, but that was what was, and that's what we're seeking. Yeah, I did allude to complexity. I have a shared driveway. Some of the driveways are dedicated, some are shared. And I have a shared driveway with Ken, he's behind me. And it's complicated to do that. If one person, you know, if you're gonna do it at the time of sale, or one person wants to do it but can't, and the other one has good head. It's definitely complicated. It has to do with the width of how, I learned this in talking to a contractor. There's a special machine they have for pavement, blacktop, and it has a certain number of width, and it's also a significant thing whether how much margin we have from the house, and that'll determine whether the machine can fit actually, if we're just trying to do half of it. He thought it couldn't, so I would need special consideration from my neighbor. And I don't know about his schedule, about his means, etc. So that's another reason for maybe grandfather, like the other villages do, and like how I think it was originally communicated. And I think that the lady brought it up too. Basic, you might say, I mentioned equity, but it's just being neighborly, I guess, is what I'm guessing all those villages that I just cited, and 0508, administrations over here understood they didn't want to go and smack someone with a $20,000 assessment. And just after they're just you know having enough trouble just paying the bills. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
I think that's it.
Appreciate
Thanks for hearing me out.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming. Stay safe.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening, Riverside Board of Trustees. My name is Kenneth Carpez. Last name is K-A-R-P-E-Z. Our residence is 60 Pine Avenue, Riverside. Our family has been there for 55 years, and we always try to maintain the property and make it as nice as possible for the rest of Riverside to enjoy. But I just want to say that I'm on Social Security disability. I've had 5 surgeries on my legs and a stroke last year. I'm on fixed income, and I just want to say that it's financially impossible for me to pave my driveway. And also, if I sell the house and go to an assisted living community, the value of the house goes down because the next person has to incur that cost. I looked into the cost of it. My driveway is $15,000, which I find that hardly nominal, and I cannot budget for it since I'm on a fixed income, and everything I make goes to the well-being of the house. In the meantime, I thank you very much for your time, and that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carpez. Please be well. That's it? Okay. So that's all the folks that we had here for public comments, so we'll move on now to the reports of village officers. First up is the village president's report. I just wanted to say a few words about what we've all been through the past several days with the threat of violence that we experienced from surrounding communities, the looting, the gang activity. Our village staff, and especially our police, fire, and public works departments, responded beautifully and professionally and with great professionalism to make sure that we all stayed safe. They mobilized their units and were faced with the dual task of not only protecting us, but also helping our surrounding communities as they responded to much more dire circumstances that, thank God, we did not experience here. So my heartfelt thanks, and I know I speak for everybody on the village board, goes out to them. And also our businesses who, without batting an eye, closed their doors, incurring loss on top of loss that they've already incurred, simply to keep us safe. And they did it because, as always, they put the interest and the well-being of our residents first. And then lastly, our residents who responded well to the village's request to stay home. That request and your response took a lot of pressure off of the first responders who were already stretched very thin. I'm glad to say that the violence has subsided. We can only hope that it stays that way. But my thanks to everyone involved for really what was a village-wide effort and taking care of one another. It was a very inspiring thing to see. Earlier today, the Village of Riverside Board of Trustees released the following statement that I would like to read. The Village of Riverside is saddened and angered by the horrific death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. We extend our deepest condolences to his family and to those in the Minneapolis community struggling to deal with its aftermath. This heartbreaking act has rightly sparked legitimate protest across our nation about the need to address systemic racism and the historic vestiges of inequality and racial injustice. We support the fight against racism and the peaceful protest striving to bring awareness to this critical issue. The tragic list of names to which Mr. Floyd now belongs must end. In the midst of this tragedy, we must seize the opportunity for constructive dialogue to assure that Mr. Floyd did not die in vain. We will not be able to heal the wounds of our national spirit until we put an end to the cause of our suffering. Unconscionable acts born of ignorance and hate and sustained by apathy and indifference. The Village of Riverside works tirelessly to build trust and respectful relationships within our village. Our police department receives constant training on de-escalation, mental health, social justice issues, and other issues around restorative justice. The actions of the officers involved in Mr. Floyd's death are anathema to the noble call to protect and serve. The Village of Riverside is committed to cultural outreach and transparency. We strive to be a community of diversity, welcoming all who want to be part of our community. We will steadfastly reject calls that would divide us or breathe clouds of hate into our village. As we struggle to respond to the enormous losses suffered in Minneapolis and other cities across the country, we must rededicate ourselves to answering the call of our better angels. We will only heal when we have a nation where all people are duly blessed with the opportunities and protections of justice and equality. And that is on behalf of myself and the Village Board of Trustees. I would also like to note that in future meeting, Chief Weitzel is going to address the board and the residents with regard to training that is provided to our police department on a range of issues, as well as the efforts that we have made over many years to make sure that we are at the forefront of good policing practices. So that will be coming up in the near future. And also later this summer, and we are working out the details of this now, we are going to have an opportunity to have a direct public dialogue with our residents on the issues that have been raised by the tragic death of Mr. Floyd. God bless him and God bless his family, and to all those still struggling to get the country that we all deserve. Thank you. Next up is the appointment of various commissioners and board members. We have quite a few this evening, so please bear with me. And at the end of this, I'd ask for a motion and a second to make these appointments. Mr. Greg Gorski for Chair of Riverside TV, term to expire 2021. Bridget Doherty to the Economic Development Commission, term to expire 2023. Jennifer Fournier, EDC, term to expire 2023, and the chair term to expire 2021. And Amy Jaksic, also EDC, term to expire 2023. For the Historical Commission, Diane Sergioli, term to expire 2023. Constance Guardi, term to expire 2023, and chair term to expire 2021. James Petrozilka, term to expire 2023. For the Landscape Advisory Commission, Lisa Lambros, term to expire 2023. Kathy Maloney, chair, term to expire 2021. Mary Plunkett, term to expire 2023. And Julie Chaff, term to expire 2023. For the Planning and Zoning Commission, Jennifer Hanahan, term to expire 2025. Jill Mateo, chair, term to expire 2021. And Teresa Pelletier, term to expire 2025. For the Preservation Commission, Michael Leary, term to expire 2023. And Charles Pipel, chair, term to expire 2021. For Parks and Recreation Board, Elizabeth Koss, chair, term to expire 2021, term to expire 2023. And lastly, for the Police Pension Board, Georgine Poulos, term to expire 2023. I would ask for a motion and a second to approve these appointments.
Make a motion to approve those appointments.
Motion by Mr. Pollack,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Peters. Any discussion? I greatly appreciate all these folks being willing to be reappointed. They do wonderful work on behalf of our community. If you're wondering why there are so many all at once, it's because the terms of our commissions expire in June of a given year. So that's why we have so many at once this evening. So with that, Ms. Haley, if you'll please call the roll.
Trustee Hannah.
Aye.
Trustee Peters.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Gallagher.
Aye.
Trustee Visa.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. That's all I have for this evening. Manager Francis, it's your turn for the manager's report.
I have a couple of items to report to the village board. One is an update with regard to the ordinance that was approved at our last meeting, which is an ordinance approving temporary uses of village right-of-way and other public and private spaces for outdoor dining and other authorized purposes, and approving certain temporary, which approved the use of several public areas for our outdoor dining spaces. With regard to that, I have the authority to approve additional requests, but I do have to report back those requests to the village board at the following meeting. After that meeting on May 27th, Aunt Diana's requested the designation of a parking space in front of their store to be designated as a 15-minute parking space for curbside pickup, and that request was approved on Friday, May 29th, 2020. The other item that I have to report is for residents' purposes. Due to the economic impact of COVID-19 on Riverside residents, the village has delayed the due date for vehicle sticker and pet licenses renewal until July 31st, and that was approved by the board previously. Residents should expect their renewal form in mid-June. To ensure the safety of our residents and staff, renewals will not be processed over the counter this year. Residents will be able to pay online or drop off payment in our silver drop box located outside the village hall. Once we receive the paperwork for those vehicle stickers and pet licenses, We will process those, and the tags and the licenses will be mailed back to residents. That is it for my report this evening.
Thank you very much. We'll move on now to the approval of the consent agenda. On the agenda this evening, approve the voucher list of bills June 4, 2020. Approve the Village Board of Trustee regular meeting minutes of May 21, 2020. Approve the Village Board of Trustees special meeting minutes of May 27, 2020. Review and file the Historical Commission meeting minutes of February 17, the Landscape Advisory Commission meeting minutes of March 10, the Police Pension Board meetings of April 22, that one is 2019, and the Police Pension Board meeting minutes of April 21, 2020. And lastly on the agenda, a resolution to approve an amendment to the village-administered Section 457 Deferred Compensation Plan pursuant to the CARES Act. Does anyone need anything removed for discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
So move. Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion by Mr. Pollack.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Hannan. Please call the roll.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Peters.
Aye.
Trustee Pollack.
Aye.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Giza.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up are reports of departments, commissions, and trustee liaisons. Does anyone have a trustee liaison report this evening? Hearing none, we'll move on to ordinances and resolutions. First up is an ordinance amending various sections of the Village of Riverside zoning ordinance relative to gravel driveways, and this is an item continued from March 19th, 2020. Director Abt.
Yes, a brief update. This began with a gravel driveway variation for 2 properties on Berry Point. At that time, the Planning and Zoning Commission noted that the code provisions that are currently in our ordinance for gravel driveways were ambiguous, confusing, and unclear. And as part of their recommendation regarding that variance, they recommended that the village board consider code amendments that would clarify the code and make it explicit relative to the ability to maintain a gravel driveway going forward. The village board considered this recommendation and tabled discussion of the gravel driveway variance for staff and the village attorney to prepare a draft text amendment and take it through the approval process. So the Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on December 16th and made a recommendation to the village board that would make certain changes, and these include allowing existing gravel driveways to remain until the property is sold, to require the gravel driveways to be replaced with an approved driveway material within 1 year of the sale of the property, to require existing gravel driveways to be maintained to the existing maintenance standards, and to revise the current maintenance standards to only require edging for decorative pea gravel driveways. This came back before you then, and the village board remanded the text amendment back to the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider additional topics. These included discussing allowing decorative pea gravel driveways for non-landmarked properties, listing additional pervious pavement options to reflect the village's preference for permeable materials, and to evaluate the pros and cons of allowing crushed gravel driveways. Additionally, the Board of Trustees directed staff to verify the number of gravel driveways to determine the actual impact of the code change. So this went back to the Planning and Zoning Commission again to discuss those remanded issues on February 26th. At the board's direction, staff did survey the entire community and did find a few additionally affected properties. These were primarily parking pads or garage aprons located adjacent to alleys in the village. It also included a gravel area between 2 adjacent driveways. So there are now a total of 35 gravel driveways or parking pads. We had previously identified 29 properties. It should be noted that the village does have a few gravel public alleys. This includes on either side of the properties on Northgate Court, as well as behind Kent Road. Additionally, the accesses to Scout Cabin and Indian Gardens have gravel access drives and or parking areas. Planning and Zoning Commission was provided with a list of pros and cons for gravel driveways, standards for permeable pea gravel driveways, and a list of other types of decorative gravel that could be considered permeable, as well as a list of other types of permeable pavement that could be added to the permitted materials list. The Planning and Zoning Commission discussed each of these items and had the following additional comments or recommendations on the remanded items that you sent to them. Those are in a separate findings of fact that's included in your packet, but I'll go through them really quick right now. As for the non-landmark properties having pea gravel driveways, the commissioners recommended allowing permeable pea gravel driveways or other similar decorative gravel driveways for non-landmarked properties. They recommended using our engineers' recommended standards. For adding additional permeable pavement list to the lists, the commissioners recommended adding the materials listed by staff to the approved materials list in the code. This included permeable pavers, pea gravel, permeable concrete, porous asphalt, grasscrete, or other similar void structures. And in evaluating the pros and cons of allowing crushed gravel driveways and whether they should be required to be replaced at the time a property is sold or simply grandfathered, the commissioners were split in their recommendation. 2 commissioners did not believe the pros provided sufficient reason to change their previous recommendation of replacing the driveway at the time the property is sold. 2 commissioners believed that the cons were not sufficient enough to show that gravel was significantly worse than concrete or asphalt, provided that the driveway was properly maintained. They recommended grandfathering the existing gravel driveways, but requiring that they be maintained weed-free, no bare spots, uniform layer of gravel evenly distributed. And then as to whether the 6 additional identified gravel driveways impact how the issue of nonconformity should be viewed and any hardship imposed upon affected properties, the commissioners did not believe that the additional 6 properties had any impact on their present or previous discussions or findings and recommendations. The commissioners did discuss adding the gravel driveway maintenance and construction standards to the building code rather than having them housed in the zoning code. So that was an additional comment they had, was that perhaps that's something that should be housed in a different area and then just referenced by the zoning code. At this time, based on the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation on those additional issues, we are asking direction from the board on what to include in the ordinance adopting the text amendments. So the draft that you have before you is the original draft from their original recommendation that was before you back in January. So based on the commission's recommendations, we're looking for some direction on how you would like us to revise that particular ordinance in regards to those matters.
Thank you very much. So tonight, staff is just asking for a direction, so we are not in need of any motion or second at this time. So let's just go through them one at a time. The first question that was that we remanded back to the Planning and Zoning Commission was, should decorative pea gravel driveways be permitted on non-landmark properties? Currently, they are only allowed on landmark properties. The commissioners recommended allowing permeable pea gravel driveways or other similar decorative gravel driveways for non-landmark purposes. They recommend using the engineer's recommended standards. So, trustees, what do you think about their recommendation?
I'm in agreement with their recommendation.
I am in agreement with that recommendation as well.
I see Trustee Evans shaking her
Yes.
head. She's out of range of the microphone. Mr. Hannan?
The one question I had, looking at the summary, pea gravel, I understand. Porous asphalt, is that different than regular asphalt, or what are we looking
Yes,
for there?
It's
Okay.
a different material than your typical asphalt.
Okay. So, I think expanding pea gravel to non-historic areas makes a lot of sense.
Mr. Gallegos and Mr. Giso, what do you think about this first item?
Trustee Gallegos would also like to see pea gravel on non-historic properties.
Mr. Giso?
Pea gravel as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next question. Should additional pervious pavement options be added to the list of permitted driveway materials to reflect the village's preference for permeable materials? And if so, what are those options? The commissioners recommended adding the materials listed by staff to the approved materials list, and these include permeable pavers, pea gravel, permeable concrete, porous asphalt, grasscrete, or similar void structures. Trustees?
jumped the gun on porous asphalt. Yeah, I like the expansion. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I think, I'm not a materials person, but if this is the complete list of potential options, then I'm okay with it.
I am in agreement with the recommendation.
Is that
I agree, yes.
Mr. Galgos, Mr. Gisa on this item?
Trustee Gallegos is in agreement with this as well. I agree as well.
So before we get to the complicated one, let me just throw this one out. The commission did discuss moving the gravel driveway maintenance and construction standards to the building code rather than the zoning code. Is there consensus on that as well?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think in part it's going to depend upon how we handle the non-conforming structures, what we do with existing gravel driveways. But, you know, as far as maintenance, how they need to be maintained, that seems clearly something that's appropriate for a building code as opposed to what's allowed and what's not.
I would agree.
A question, would it be in the building code and in the property maintenance code?
Yes. So I think certain things would need to be added to the building code in regards to, if we were to allow the new pea gravel driveways, creating what those standards are. And then as far as maintenance, then those standards would be under the property maintenance section of the code.
I would agree.
Mr. Galgos, Mr. Gisa?
Trustee Gallegos has no objection to this. I agree.
Thank you. So now we come to the item that we heard, I thought, quite eloquent statements made on earlier this evening by many of our residents as to how we want to handle existing crushed gravel driveways. The commission was asked to evaluate the pros and cons of allowing crushed gravel driveways and whether they should be required to be replaced at the time of the property is sold or simply grandfathered. Two of the commissioners recommended that they should be replaced with 1 year of sale, and two commissioners said that they believe that they could be grandfathered in, but they must meet the current maintenance standards. What are your thoughts? Mr. Fowler?
This was certainly the primary issue when we discussed this in the past, and let me preface this by saying I appreciate the work that the Planning and Zoning Commission put into this. I know we've sent it back and forth with them, and they spent a lot of time and did a very, very nice job with this. At the last time we discussed it, I believe I asked the question, what are the pros and cons? What I intended to ask, what I think I asked and it came out was, what is the public interest in eliminating the gravel driveways? Is it pollution? Is it property values? Is it public health, safety? And I did not see anywhere in the record any compelling reason that we would not grandfather them. In other words, anytime we impose a standard on our residents and there's a cost to it, that cost has to be less than the impact on the public interest, on the welfare of the community. I don't see that here. I don't see a compelling reason why we as a local government need to impose that cost on residents who have legal non-conforming driveways. So based on that, I am inclined to just grandfather these driveways.
With the stipulation that they must be maintained per code,
Of
right?
course, with the stipulation that they must be maintained, like any.
Ms. Evans, did you have something? Please.
I did. I agree with Doug, because just after listening to the community today, it was clear that it will create a hardship for seniors and people with disabilities, and they will suffer a loss in the sale. But there would still be out-of-pocket costs to bring their gravel driveways to code. So selling the house won't be a solve for that. I think maybe they thought that would be a solution for people, like they wouldn't have to buy a new driveway, they could just put it off the new owners, but I understand the concern that it would affect their property value when they go to sell it, and I don't really think that's fair, and I'm not comfortable putting that on the residents. I do think they should be grandfathered with the requirement to bring their driveways up to the code that we include in the ordinance.
Is that it? Okay. Mr. Hand?
Yeah, just a clarification, hopefully Director Abb can, we're sort of throwing around the term grandfathered, and I want to make sure I understand what that means, versus when we talk about garages, we talk about non-conforming structures. And then if you tear it down or do something, you need to bring that into conformity. What are we contemplating here with sort of the distinction between those two concepts, if there is one?
I think this would be, again, it would be similar, it would be a non-conforming item that they would be allowed to maintain, and we would have specific maintenance standards that they would have to be maintained to, but they would not be allowed to, say, expand the driveways. They couldn't go from a 9-foot wide gravel driveway to a 10-foot wide gravel driveway, similar to the way we deal with existing non-conforming other driveways. So kind of grandfathering in that way. And it would be allowed to stay in perpetuity in that way. So.
Okay, that's extremely helpful to me. I just want to echo Trustee Pollack's statement that, I appreciate everyone who came out today to give public comments. They were very compelling and really brought home for me the potential economic hardship of either requiring removal or putting a burden that would result in an adjustment to the sales price. I think the last thing we want to do as a board is to adopt a rule that would make homes in Riverside harder to sell. So that's sort of compelling towards me, and also appreciate the nonconformity treatment, that it's not something that will continue to grow. There's 35 nonconforming driveways. If they stay within their existing parameters, they can maintain them. I think moving those maintenance standards over to those other sections makes a lot of sense. And once those are moved, the enforcement, I think, takes care of itself.
Ms. Peters?
Yes, I actually agree with everything my fellow trustees have said so far. I wanted to just point out one thing that struck me, that we only have 35 of these, and obviously at one point we had a lot more. So the market is working to address this issue. It's slower than maybe what would be considered through a code amendment or whatnot, but to me, it's clearly working, and the market will drive it eventually to be smaller than 35. So I think that's about, something we need to consider as well.
Mr. Jisa?
Yeah, I would agree with Trustee Hannon.
Mr. Gallegos?
Trustee Gallo just wants to verify that we don't have any aprons that are made of gravel. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Any what?
Aprons, I think is what he said.
Did you say aprons?
There are no aprons in town that have gravel.
There are a few, I believe they're in the list.
So Ms. App says there are a few gravel aprons. Do you have a concern about that?
Well, I mean, if that does have a concern as far as some of the public works machines that take that into, the maintenance of those machines as well as into the sewer. But for the most part, I am okay with grandfathering gravel driveways, provided that the homeowners keep maintenance with it.
Great, thank you. Ms. App, do you have any information on?
I think we have one or two gravel
Just one or two.
aprons, and that's obviously something that we don't want. So hopefully that is something that, as we do perhaps road improvement projects or something, that gets taken care of over time. But yes, gravel driveways in the apron can definitely cause problems, especially with snow plowing, heavy rain events and things like that. You're just more likely to be getting gravel into the roads and into the storm sewers or on sidewalks, so.
When we do street renovations, the village does the aprons, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so we would be replacing
In theory,
those
we would be.
over time.
Yeah. Once we get to those roads where
Okay.
those do exist, they'd be replaced at that point.
So, Ms. Apt, have we gone through, is there further guidance you need on this?
No, I think that's good. I would say we did receive 2 comments. And I can read those into the record if you'd
Please.
like, regarding
Please.
the matter. So you received one from Carolyn McNally, and she states, "Dear Village Board, I am responding to your proposed text amendment on gravel driveways as my apartment building located at 50 Lincoln Avenue has a gravel driveway. There are a couple of reasons that I am opposed to changing the gravel driveway for my property. First, the drainage in a gravel area into the earth is much better to the environment than allowing excess rain water to pour off of a paved surface into the storm drainage sewers overloading the system. The latest flooding in our area proved that. Second, the paved area would be too big and unappealing. It would look too commercial for the building. I have no problem with adding more gravel to even out the appearance, but am totally against paving the parking area. Thank you, Carolyn McNally." And then we also have one from Thomas Holachek. He says, "Due to the COVID pandemic and the resulting restrictions, I'm following Sonia's suggestion and submitting my comments for this evening's meeting via email in hopes that they will be presented at the meeting. The documents I've read acknowledge that Riverside itself has 2 extensive gravel drive-ups, one at Indian Gardens and one at Scout Cabin. Can the village in good conscience ask its residents to be compliant when the village itself falls out of compliance in a substantial way? Before any residents are cited for noncompliance, the village itself needs to correct these noncompliant areas first. One of the major arguments against gravel driveways is that they are not permeable to water. Later, it is stated that if gravel driveways are allowed, they must be kept free of weeds. How can gravel driveways be non-permeable to water yet still have weeds? This is a contradiction. There are several properties with gravel driveways that have still been omitted from the updated list. There are many properties in Riverside which have gravel in their backyards, hidden in behind bushes, adjacent to patios, adjacent to driveways, etc. These are not being addressed. I will provide a few additional lots and addresses that are omitted from the list, yet are substantially out of compliance." And he lists 178 Northgate, a partial gravel driveway discreetly covered by shredded cedar, 182 Northgate, a very long gravel driveway east of 182 Northgate that is well hidden, 450 Northgate Court with a very long driveway west of 450 Northgate Court that also is not readily apparent, 460 Selborne, there is a small area adjacent to the driveway that is gravel, and the Pine Avenue Apartments across the street from the fire department, the entire parking lot driveway is gravel. Several others have loose gravel in their backyards adjacent to driveways and patios. Because gravel contains no petroleum products, because of remaining inconsistencies in the permeability argument, and because many more places are currently out of compliance, including the village, making enforcement a nightmare and an embarrassment for the village, my suggestion would be to grandfather in those properties that have gravel driveways and prohibit any new gravel driveways from being installed effective immediately. Thanks for your consideration. I would appreciate your acknowledgement that my comments have been given and discussed. I would say the addresses that he cites here, these are all addresses that are adjacent to a public alley. So what he is seeing there is actually a gravel public alley that we have, that these properties are adjacent to, with the exception of 178 Northgate, and that is not a partial gravel driveway. We actually made them dirt over the gravel extension that they had. They came in for a permit to replace their driveway, and they wanted to widen it to that whole width, and we said that they couldn't have a driveway that wide. So they put some dirt and mulch in that area along their driveway.
Thank you.
And that was a couple of years ago. So those are the 2 comments that we had received. We received an additional comment, but she came in and gave her comments at the podium as well.
So I would just like to echo what Trustee Pollack said. I mean, this has been floating around for quite a while now. There's been a lot of work done by staff, done by our Planning and Zoning Commission, done by all of you in reviewing this and repeatedly. I greatly appreciate the comments and the pursued interest of the residents who let us know their feelings. I thought they probably turned the tide on this by providing us their input, and I'm very gratified with the result that we have reached, and I agree wholeheartedly with what you have determined. So the next item, I need direction from Mr. Mars on this. The next item is an ordinance approving variations to allow an existing shared gravel driveway to be maintained. My understanding is, given the intent of this board to approve the text amendment that will allow and will grandfather gravel driveways in, that this variation becomes moot. But we haven't yet voted on that text amendment. So how do we do this? How do we do this?
Right, correct. So the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission on that particular variation request was that they be allowed to keep their existing gravel driveway so long as it was brought into conformance with the maintenance standards that we have in the code, which is exactly what you're allowing everybody with gravel driveways. You're proposing to allow everyone with gravel driveways to do that now. So assumedly, they won't need to pursue this, but I suggest that maybe Sonia reach out to them between now and the next meeting and let them know where the board appears to be going with this, and see what kind of action they want to take. If they say, well, if the board goes ahead and grandfathers everybody and we're okay coming into the conformance with the maintenance standards, then they'll probably withdraw their request and we can terminate that one.
So just from a technical standpoint, should we table this?
Yes,
until the next meeting?
You should, well, continue, you don't, not really table, just continue both of them to the June 18th meeting, and we'll resolve both of them at that time.
Okay, do I have consensus to continue this to the next meeting pending your vote on the text amendment? Are you okay with that, Trustee Gallegos and Trustee Gisa?
Trustee Gallegos is fine with that.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you. So that takes care of that. We have no considerations this evening. We do have some new business that is a little heartbreaking for me, but Trustee Peters, would you like to?
Thank you, President Sells. I wanted to share with the general public something that I've already shared with the board and the staff. It's very bittersweet for me to say that the next board meeting is going to be my last. My family has, we've taken an opportunity to move to Southwest Michigan. Both my husband and I have some great opportunities there to pursue. So we're selling our home in Riverside, which just breaks my heart. And I will save my a fuller thanks for the next board meeting. But I just want to say that it's truly been an honor to serve on this board and the previous board. And I've really enjoyed my time here. So if you have any questions, certainly feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
And I'm not quite sure we're going to accept this. We'll have to have a discussion about this among the board. But just like Liz said, we'll talk more about this at the next meeting and have an opportunity to say proper goodbyes to someone who has contributed so much to our village. So we'll deal with that next time. We have no need for an executive session this evening, so I'd ask for a motion and a second to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Adjourn. Motion by Mr. Pollack,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Evans. Please call the roll.
Trustee Hammond.
Aye.
Trustee Peters.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Trustee Giza.
Aye.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned. Stay safe and please take care of one another. Thank you. Good night.